Okay, so welcome everybody. A lot of familiar faces and a lot of new ones, so that's always great. This is the OpenFGA community meeting for July 2023. And agenda is going to be pretty straightforward today. And so your usual introductions, then we're going to mention a few things we've been working with the team and shipped, and what's next. And then we'll open to some Q&A. There's an agenda document that is I will paste it here. In case someone wants to add any questions to the agenda, you can go and add them there. I know Andrew added something about this with permissions. We are going to cover later in the call, but feel free to add your own questions and we can go through them. So this is us. A few of us are in the call. Some of them have usually slow mornings for them, and they kind of start getting to work later. Not here yet, but this is us. We are probably going to see a few new faces in the next few months, which is going to be great. So we have more help to build more things for the project. So it's going to be cool. So, and as usual, and for some of you, this might be a little repetitive because we try to always do it with the members in the call to know who you are and what you've been doing with the project. So it will be great if you can spend, I don't know, a few seconds explaining who you are, where are you working, and what have you been doing with OpenFGA lately. Okay, I will start putting someone on the spot so we can make it faster. Andrew, you're the only one with your camera on, so maybe you can start.
All right. Hi, I'm Andrew Powers. I work in Seattle at a startup that makes like transcription and summarization tools for Zoom meetings. And so we're using OpenFGA to model permissions and authorization for access to those documents. The company is called Read AI.
Great.
I'll go again. I know you've heard this before. I'm Jacob. I'm an engineer in the identity group at GoDaddy. I work out of Napa, California. But we're building out our authorization platform and using OpenFGA to power fine-grained authorization to resources. So yeah, we're building it out right now, and really excited about where things are going. It looks like I've got Pranaya from my team here too.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Pranaya, and I work out of Kirkland office for GoDaddy in Seattle. So I am from Jacob's team. So we are using OpenFGA for our fine-grained authorization checks. So yeah, that's it.
Hey all, Chahat here from Maersk, based out at India. So we are just trying to assess and evaluate the authorization models in and around it. So I found out OpenFGA pretty interesting, and it's been supported by CNCF. So yeah, that's why I'm here. Yeah.
Thank you, Chahat.
Hi, I'm Evan Grayson. I work at a company called Align. We're a compliance company, and we're looking to actually move our internal application over to a more fine-grained authorization model. We're kind of on our third revision of our POC, trying to figure out the model completely, but I think we'll be hopefully in production here soon. So.
Awesome. Yeah, so Evan, if you at some moment want help to kind of review the model and recommendations, feel free to let us know and we can schedule a quick call and help you go through that if that helps.
Awesome. Sounds good. Thank you.
Yep. So, and I don't know, Johnny, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I'm Johnny from Pluralsight. Our current authorization process only authorizes a subset of what we need at Pluralsight. So we're using OpenFGA to create a more scalable solution that can authorize everything under the Pluralsight umbrella. And so far it's going pretty well.
Great, Johnny, thank you. Peter, you want to go next?
I mean, I work at Pluralsight with Johnny, so I have all the same shared experiences, and yeah, we are making some good progress and hoping to keep moving forward with OpenFGA.
Awesome. Yeah, I need to know if you were Pluralsight Peter, but yeah, so welcome back. And so who else we have in the call? And I see that Zev and Ishan just joined. We are kind of introducing ourselves. I don't know if you want to share who you are, where you're working for, and how is having your experience with OpenFGA for now.
Hey, yeah, hi, sure. Ishan here. Others I've connected before sometime in June. I've been using OpenFGA for the last 3 or so months now. We are pre-production on OpenFGA, so we've been using it in our staging environment for quite some time, and yeah, it's been going pretty well. Happy to be on this first call with you guys.
Awesome. Chris, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I'm Chris, based out of Jacksonville with Beeline. We're still kind of exploring FGA, doing some POC work around trying to use it to solve some of our permission and visibility problems, trying to make it more scalable. Today, it's like some really complex SQL queries and that sort of thing. So,
awesome. Thanks, Chris. Sev, you want to go next?
Sev mentioned he can only type, not speak.
Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, perfect. Sorry. And Matt, I don't know if you want. I know you work for Okta, but maybe you. I think this is the first time we see this call, so maybe you can join what you've been up to.
Yeah, it's the first time I've joined. I've been at Okta since a week before the IPO, so 2017, and I do a lot of Java stuff, and I'm trying to convince the Spring Security team to add a OpenFGA extension to their
nice
army of tools. So
cool.
Happy to be here.
Okay, so thanks everyone for introducing yourselves and taking the time. So let's start directly to what we've been doing. So you might have seen that we shipped a new version of OpenFGA last week, and we've been mentioning that our list objects implementation needed some work for some use cases, in particular where you were using and but not in the relationships. And that shipped, we also deployed that to our cloud product, and we've seen like a very good impact in our customers that are calling these objects that way, like a latency going from decreasing 20 times or something like that for some of those use cases. So it's pretty cool. And then you also might have seen that we fixed the security vulnerability, and it was kind of interesting. So we had like Adrian is one of the team members that always try to break OpenFGA or FGA system, finding funny models and different ways to try to break us. And he found one where you have a model that have some circle dependencies, and you do some specific check calls. Our CPU could go very high, right? And potentially that could kill your OpenFGA solution, right? If you have all of the services with all of the nodes with high CPU. For OpenFGA customers, that it will imply that you build like those kind of very contrived models that you probably are not doing, right? And also doing those check calls. So I think the risk for OpenFGA customers was pretty little, but I think you should upgrade to the newer version anyway. And for OddSeed.ga, for the hosted version, the risk was higher because, yeah, maybe an attacker could be one of those models and start calling check, and there will be an impact in the cloud product, right? And so we rolled it out immediately to the cloud product too. So that was with OpenFGA. We also have an OpenFGA CLI beta that we shipped yesterday. So Ragged was kind of working overtime in the last couple of days because we wanted to be ready for this call. So that's good for me as a product manager, because I have this monthly meeting now, like that we can use as a milestone to have things ready, right? So it works like a way to set the pace of the team. So that's nice, a nice trick for a product manager. And then we also did some things in the help charts, mostly some work for external people. I don't think they are here, but thank you very much to all the people contributing to the help chart. So we are working now in the CLI, and we have a couple of more iterations, and then we will go over them. We're also working in sharing and supporting some additional ABAC scenarios. We mentioned that in the last call. We can go over them again in this call if someone is interested. And next, we're going to start working in some better tooling. One is Java SDK, and we are going to build in Visual Studio integrations. And the idea there is with some Visual Studio integrations and the work we're doing this in the CLI, we're going to have a very good experience for working with models and testing things on Visual Studio Code, instead of relying in the playground, or in addition of relying in the playground for doing that kind of work. So we're pretty excited about that too. And then we are also working on, today in OpenFGA, you have a shared secret that you can use to make calls to the server, right? We want to have more fine-grained permissions to OpenFGA, so you can have specific permissions for different stores and things like that, right? So we're working towards that goal too. So let's start with a demo. So, and the first version of the CLI that you can use today is a very simple, has very simple wrappers on top of the API and a few more things like a command to import tuples to the system in multiple worker threads and things like that, and a way to validate models. But besides that, it's a very simple API wrapper. Now we're adding in the next iteration, we're starting adding support for using the DSL directly from the CLI. And I'm gonna now let Rag share his screen and demo that I think he's been working on.
Hey everyone, hello again. So we demoed the CLI a while back. I'm not gonna go through the same thing again. One of the biggest changes since then is it's actually out, so you can try it yourself. Just head to OpenFGA, like on GitHub OpenFGA/CLI. You can see the installation instructions, and we definitely love your feedback. It's still early days. Expect like things to change, error messages to be more helpful, but we wanted to put it out early so we can gather your feedback. So quick demo. What's new? One, you can install it. So this and this particular, we installed it through Brew. You can see completion working. Let's start with, you can do the stores, and everything else works. So let's it reads your environment variables. So if you have set the store ID, you can do things like just write a model, and that's it. We also added support for importing. So importing was, if you have a bunch of tuples, you want to import them in bulk, you can now do this. It supports YAML and JSON. Note that this shows you both successful and failure, because when you're importing in bulk, some might pass, some might fail. And the same thing applies that right now, how we write to the write to FGA is through like batches of transactions. So sometimes partial, like one tuple failing can cause other tuples to fail. If that's a problem for you, you can pass in the, forgot that, max tuples per write. I'll remember it later. Look at the docs and you'll see it. That's pretty much it for the updates for what we had since then. Again, it's released, so go try it out. And my favorite is it's also available for Linux, so install our Debian and RPM releases. But what's more, also, like, we have the validate. So for example, this one is going to get all the models from the GitHub store, and then validate each one from the playground. So you can see some of the older versions we had were based on the old schema, so are no longer valid since we dropped support for this new schema. So you can see they're not valid. Why? Because they have an invalid schema. Some of the newer ones are all valid. So validate is a new one. You don't need to run it against the store. You can run it against some of your models locally to make sure they pass. If you don't want to use the playground, or you don't want to use you don't want to actually write it to the API, you can use it. Now that's mostly it for the released version. But what we're working more now is transformation. So as Andreas mentioned, our next project is to be able to make working with the DSL easier. You have the playground. Yes, not everyone likes it, or it does its job, but we could do better. We have a syntax transformer, but it's more of a node thing, which not everyone wants to install Node just to be able to transform. So we built this now into our CLI. It's not released yet. There's a bunch of a few bugs we're fixing, but overall it works. So you can transform this is transforming the GitHub model. We can transform the expenses model. It also works to transform back to JSON. So if we have the FGA file, we want to transform back to JSON, we can. And all the model methods supported. So you can do, for example, list. It lists all the stores you have. And you can do get. So get by default, if you don't pass a particular model ID, it just gets the latest one. So in this case, it transforms the latest one. You can see it. You can do writes based on the FGA. So so all the methods that support inputting or outputting the model now work. What else did we add? That's pretty much it. Yeah. Hope you like it, and please try it out and let us know your feedback and what more do you want for us to build for you.
Perfect. Thank you. Any comments or feedback?
Nice work on the demo. Holy.
Super cool. I've got a question about maybe like future stuff with it. So with the ability to import tuples and stuff is really cool, and it starts making me think of how I would go about testing a model, right? So in the playground, we've got the nice little test thing where you can create what you can insert your tuples, right? And then you can write little tests and say, hey, execute these things. Will that be something that would be part of the CLI, or I could in the future?
This is a perfect
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for the question. Yeah. So this is that was my next slide. So this is what was coming after that. So we are doing this in 3 iterations. The first iteration was this basic API wrappers. The second one was support for DSL, and the third one is going to be support for being able to run tests on top of FGA. Right? So in this case, you have a model. This is the model, and you can write some tests. The tests, you can specify the tuples that you will consider for the test, and then you can check for specific object and user and some relations, and you can assert the values that we expect. Right? The idea is that we are going to run this so the CLI today is it's including a piece of the OpenFGA server, so we can evaluate the things in the CLI without going to the server at all. Right? So it's not that you need to have a server, a store, add a model, add some tuples, and then run some tests. You can have self-contained tests with this thing. Actually, today, this validate command that is already in the CLI is doing that. It's using the validate features we have in the server, right? Not nothing special, right? So by using the server code in the same binary. I don't know if that answers your question, Chris.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Cool. Yeah, we are. I'm personally pretty excited about this one because I need to demo FGA a lot, right? And this will make my FGA demos much easier than using the playground, at least for myself, the way I prefer to do things. Anyway, so this is this. Okay, so this is the other one. Yeah, so we have the other kind of problem. So this one includes the model inside the same file with the tests. This one lets you reference a model that is outside the YAML file, so you can keep them separate, right? But still reference and use them for the tests. Cool. Okay, so so this is basically what we've been doing. That we have something else that we mentioned the last time. Let me just share it here with this ABAC support. The idea here is like, for example, if you want to check that you want to grant permission for a user during specific duration, like so you have access for 10 seconds, you could write a tuple that's kind of bind some parameters for a specific function that you define in the model, right? So in this case, we'll say the user can view have a non-expired grant. That implies that current time is less than the moment you granted plus the duration. You you write a tuple that specifies the moment you wrote it and the duration, and then when you check, we consider that, right? So you can start using. You can do this. This is one example. The other one will be like checking for an IP address, right? So like, and you can specify the IP address in check, and then check if the user is in that range. Right? So this is the first iteration. We are thinking of. We have some ideas that we are exploring. I didn't put in the slides, but let me just share my screen here. Sorry, give me a second. Share again. So this one, this adds a couple of additional features to what we showed. First is that instead of this being like a static function, right, that is kind of established in the model, we can specify a list of possible functions that you can assign to this relation. Okay, and then we'll say with optional, which is another feature, we'll say maybe you don't specify any relationship. Okay? And then we can do things like for a user, we say that the condition we want to apply is just incorporate network for another user in office hours, right? So I can define which condition I'm going to use depending on the user. And potentially we can also do this. This is kind of another feature that we might do or not, or sooner or later, which is even specify two conditions, right? So it needs to have this one and this one for this specific user. And then you have another user that doesn't have any condition. The user A can always delete regardless of the IP address, the time of the day or whatever, right? And then if you, for example, user X, which is the first one, he can only delete in the corporate network. This IP is not, so we return false. User Y can always depends on office hours. So regardless of the IP, if it's in office hours, we get true, right? User C requires a condition between office hours and incorporate network. The IP address is incorporate network, and let's say it's in office hours, so we get true. And user A will always get true because they have any condition. Right? So in addition of supporting conditions, we're adding flexibility on when to apply them, right? Based on the tuples you have written. This is kind of the work we are doing for adding more ABAC support for a model like the Zanzibar model. The questions make sense?
Yeah, we got a question. So how would those conditions work with multi-model stores, right? So you can create a new authorization model if you have old tuples that are referencing old conditions that are no longer defined in the new model. How do we handle that? I guess I can kind of answer that. That is definitely a problem that we have to think through. We haven't thought through it a ton yet. It's kind of a similar problem that we already have though, right? So if you introduce new types in an authorization model that didn't exist before, and then you write tuples for it, you might be evaluating checks or list objects queries, expand queries on tuples that don't have types in the current model that are being evaluated, right? And so what we do there is we kind of filter them out. We skip over them, if you will. And we don't evaluate tuples that don't match or meet the criteria, the type restrictions of the current model being evaluated. So it's similar to that, but it's a little bit more nuanced, because you might have the same type and the same relation defined in a tuple, but you might have a different condition. So does that imply that we need to allow multiple tuples of the same object, relation, and user, but with different conditions? Maybe we do. We need to explore that more, but that's definitely a part of this work. And it's one of the reasons why this work is, obviously not moving along as fast as would be ideal. There's a lot of things to consider.
Perfect. Yeah, so this is the content we have, right? So now we can start Q&A, right? We have one from Andrew that he's mentioning, talking about search with permissions scenarios. So I will open the search with permissions docs. So we have some context there. And but maybe you can explain what you want to do, Andrew, and we can talk about this.
Sure. So we're working on building like a search product where you can search over all of your meeting transcripts and like chat GPT summaries and things like that. And we need a fast way to search over the entire document corpus that you have like access to. And so it could be like meetings that I participated in, or like meetings that my team has had, things like that. And so this is, search with permissions, and some of the documents I'll have like a direct relationship to, but some of the like other documents I'll have like a relationship to through my team or something like that. And so based on this documentation, it seems like what we should probably do is subscribe to the changes API and like maintain an index of the authorization state in our database so that we can like do direct joins on transcripts, for example. And I was curious like how you would think about relationships and like team membership and those types of queries, like if you have any experience with that.
So good question. So there are a couple of things there, which is today the solutions for those scenarios are three possible solutions that we list in the document. And the and one, which is the one that is you do a search, and then when you're showing the records to a user, you start calling check for each value, right? And that works when you know that it's highly likely that whatever search result you got from your database, right, users are going to be able to see them. So you like a high percentage of records are going to be visible. So if you need to kind of remove a few of them by calling check and returning and get a false return, it will work, right? And I'm assuming that wouldn't work for your use case. Like the number of records you're going to get is too large, right? So you want to interact. Yeah. The other approach would be getting to the list objects, which is, okay, give me the list of transcripts this user can see, right? And then use that result and do like whatever filters you have and transcript ID in this list, right?
Yep.
That will work if
that's sort of what we do right now, roughly.
Okay, and perfect, and that will work if the number of IDs you're gonna get kind of can be specified in an in clause, right? So which is of course not a million, right? Is I don't know which is the number, depends on your database, right? And so I also assume then that path is not gonna work for you in the long term, right? You're gonna have at some moment so many transcripts that you don't want, you can do that. So the next option is, build some kind of index on your site, right? To say, okay, I want to have a way to know which transcripts a user can view, right? Based on the things that are being written to the store. And the complexity on that is that, so if you, with the features we have today, which is you get like the tuple that is written, you need to somehow have certain logic that you already have in the model replicated in the logic that builds the index, okay? And there's with what we have today, there's no way around it, right? It's more you need to kind of someone adds a user to a team. Now you need to find all the transcripts for that team, right? And see that and write that in the index, right? That the user can see that, right? So depending on the complexity of your model, if your model is very complex, then managing that is going to be a lot of logic that you need to replicate on your side to maintain that index. If the model is just like that use case, like the user can get to a transcript through a team, maybe it's not that big of a deal, but you need to take into account, right? So each time a user is added to a team, you need to kind of expand those records so you have a record per transcript, right, for each user, which is what you would is the easiest thing you can join with a table that has like a user one can view transcript one, right?
Yeah.
Now I will let oh, sorry.
That's sort of what I was curious about is like how much of the logic that's built into OpenFGA do we need to build in our application in order to make use of a solution like that? It sounds
yes,
like,
and I think that depends on the model, right? But at the end of the day, all the logic that you need to consider when you're defining these indirect permissions, we need to somehow be replicated in the piece you build from the index, right? And of course, it's not that you build an index for all relationships, right? Just and all types, right? It's for a few types and a few relationships. In this case, you're mentioning transcript and can view, right? So it's not that all the logic in the model needs to be replicated, but it's more like, you need to replicate the one for that specific permission. Okay. And I know that Rag and maybe Jonathan have other things to say and other ideas, and so how we can address this. I don't know if you want to add to what I just said or not.
We've talked. It's a really hard problem. Search with permissions option 3, which is the one where you somehow get a flat index that then you can do on a join table. It's obviously the most useful because if you have a flat index, technically if you have a flat index, you can query the flat index for checks, for list objects, for expand. I mean, you can do everything if you have a flat index. That's the crux, is getting the flat index. On one end of the spectrum, you might have to completely rebuild the graph resolution and logic of OpenFGA on your end, which if you're going to do that, what is OpenFGA providing you to some degree at that point? On the other end, if you only have a couple of relations that are relatively flat relationships, meaning they don't have a lot of rewrites, they don't have, viewer or editor and owner and viewer from parent and so on and so forth. If they're not super, complex, then building that index is much more easy, like Andres mentioned. What we have talked a lot about, it's a very large effort, something I do think that we do eventually probably want to do. Andres can speak to that more as a product manager, but we've talked about introducing like an expanded read changes or an expanded watch or some kind of additional streaming API that basically watches the change log, and for every tuple that changes, computes the diff, right? So it computes the flat index, and then it streams the flat index to you. And so you can start a watch over changes that are expanded changes, not just single tuple changes, because a single tuple can impact thousands of relationships that can impact access to viewership, for example. But there lies the problem with that as well, is let's say that you have a group that has access to 1 billion transcripts, right? And you remove one tuple, that one group, right? Now you've just impacted a billion rows in that flat index. And handling that problem, at that scale for any general solution is really hard. That's an extremely hard problem. So that's kind of one of the reasons, among a few others, that we haven't started tackling that problem yet. And in addition to that, to build that flattened kind of index API, expanded read changes or expanded watch, we have to have a couple of building blocks on our end in order to build that. And those are things that we've planned on building. One of them is the list users API. And the other is actually something we've actively been building to improve the list objects implementation. Internally, we call it the connected objects API. Basically, it gives you all the information about objects that are impacted by a change. And then if you join that with the users that were impacted by that change, then now you can compute the diff. you can compute all of the relationships that were impacted as a result of a single change. So we need to finish the list users API. We need to do a couple of changes to the internal connected objects API. And then we need to stitch those together in a probably distributed, highly scalable way to try and solve that problem. But even then it will have some limitations. So that's kind of very future thinking. We probably will eventually get around to that, but we got to get those building blocks done first.
Know that you don't need to, so depending on your model, mostly if you don't have and but not, you're able to go right now build the full index using just read changes and expand. You don't need to wait for us. And in some ways, this is preferable, because the problem with us sending you read changes expanded, it means we have to send you an insane amount of data in some cases, versus this where you have control. So there's some changes you don't care about, you can ignore. And you can choose to only get changes, like partial changes. And all you need to do that is basically, you would do read changes, and then for every change you're getting, you would then call expand to see, okay, what does it affect? What are its ramifications? The cool part is that means you don't need to redo all the logic on your end. So you're still like counting on OpenFGA to do the model evaluation, but what you're doing is you still need to set up that process where you're listening to read changes and reflecting. That is what's it called? This is definitely eventually consistent, because you're listening to changes. How far back and how fast you're listening to changes depends on you, but it's never going to be the same time as what you're writing. And even in our case, even if we were to offer you expanded watch, even that would not be real time. So that is the eventual consistency here, is something you would have to deal with. But yeah, but that's possible right now, so you don't need to wait for us.
It's just a lot of work, right? So it is possible. It's just a lot of work. So
yeah.
It's I do want to just kind of close that off with saying that's a similar problem that all of the other kind of, you might say, competitors or offerings in this space, right? Projects that have popped up around Zanzibar inspired relationship-based access control, all of them have the same problem, and none of them are solving it right now. And it's because it's an extremely non-trivial problem. So
that's it. The commentary on that is really helpful, though, in terms of focusing our next steps. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
The other part is that if you have the scenario where a single tuple that is written can impact a lot of index entries, right? Even if you try to solve that like by listening to the read changes, right, and updating the index yourself, it will be a hard problem to solve that way, right? Because it will imply that it's not that you're listening to 100,000 changes on our side. It's more that you still need to write 100,000 changes in your index each time. So in that case, the solution is not to have a flat index, right? And do joins with the team table or things like that, right? So start using what you already have, like the tables you already have there, and join them using the authorization model logic, right? Instead of having a flattened index, right? And that's the only solution actually for the problem where a specific change can impact a lot of permissions, right? Because you cannot keep up an index up to date there at that scale, right? With a large number of changes. Right? Make sense?
Yeah, does.
Please do keep sharing with us where you land on this sort of scale of compromises that we're describing to everyone. If you're trying something and it's not working, or if you're trying something and you think imposing limits or an architectural or design decision on your side of things is going to solve your use case, all that's going to help us prioritize and change the way we develop our roadmap. So don't hesitate to reach out or just keep coming to these meetings and talking about it. We'd love to hear it.
Yep. Okay, awesome. So any other question that anyone has that we can discuss? Okay, great. So I think we are up time. And so thank you very much for being here again. And we'll keep working on OpenFGA, hopefully having a lot of new things to share in a month. So we'll see you all there. Okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, folks.
Good day.
See ya.
So